The first day was therapeutic. Karen had always been a woman of action, and the physical labor felt like a release after weeks of political maneuvering and bureaucratic warfare. She dug methodically, marking out the dimensions of her pool with spray paint and attacking the earth with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. By noon, she had a respectable hole started, and several neighbors had gathered at their windows to watch the spectacle. Karen pretended not to notice, but she could feel their eyes on her, could practically hear their whispered conversations about her mental state. "Let them watch," she muttered, driving the shovel deeper. "They'll understand soon enough." The second day brought complications. The city inspector, a thin man with a clipboard and a permanent frown, appeared at her gate around 10 a.m. "Ma'am, I need to see your permits." Karen wiped the sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "What permits?" "Swimming pool permits, building permits, excavation permits. You can't just dig a hole in your backyard without proper documentation." "I'm not building a swimming pool," Karen said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "I'm creating a garden feature, a decorative water element. That doesn't require permits." The inspector looked at the clearly pool-shaped hole, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, this is obviously going to be a swimming pool. Prove it." They stared at each other for a long moment, the inspector clearly out of his depth when dealing with someone who understood the system as well as Karen did. Finally, he made a note on his clipboard and walked away, muttering something about following up. The third day brought rain, and Karen worked through it, her clothes soaked and her hair plastered to her skull. The neighbors had stopped watching from their windows, but she could feel their disapproval like a physical weight. Several had complained to the city about the noise, the early morning hours, the general unseemliness of having a former HOA president manually excavating her backyard. Mike Rodriguez appeared at her fence line, holding an umbrella and looking concerned. "Karen, you need to stop this." She didn't pause in her digging. "Stop what?" "This. Whatever this is, you're making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm creating a water feature on my own property. Last time I checked, that was still legal in America. You're building a pool without permits. We both know it." Karen straightened up, mud dripping from her clothes. "What I'm building is none of your business. What I do on my property is none of your business. You want to be the neighborhood watchdog? Fine. But stay on your side of the fence." Mike shook his head. "The vote is tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. You have the right to defend yourself, but after this week, I don't think it's going to make much difference." After he left, Karen stood in her hole, now nearly 4 feet deep and roughly pool-shaped, and felt the rain mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Tomorrow night, they would strip her of the title that had defined her for 12 years. They would cast her out like a common criminal, all because she had dared to want something for herself. But she would finish this pool. She would fill it with water and swim in it while they held their precious meetings and enforced their precious rules. She would show them what happened when you backed a woman like Karen Blackwood into a corner. The shovel hit something hard, and Karen knelt down to investigate. It was a pipe, a big one, running directly through the middle of her pool site. She followed it with her hands, feeling the smooth PVC surface extending in both directions. It was the main sewer line for the entire block. Karen stared at the pipe for a full minute, her mind racing through the implications. This wasn't just any pipe. This was the main sewer line that connected 12 houses to the city system. The same sewer line that the HOA had fought to get installed 15 years ago when they were still building the subdivision. The same sewer line that she had personally negotiated with the city to route through the most efficient path possible. The path that ran directly through her backyard. A laugh bubbled up from her chest, starting as a quiet chuckle and building into full-blown hysteria. She had been so focused on setbacks and aesthetics that she had forgotten the most basic principle of construction. Always call 811 before you dig. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, I'm driving down tonight. Dad's worried about you." Dad, her ex-husband David, who had left her 3 years ago because, in his words, living with you is like being married to a municipal code enforcement officer. He had been right, of course. She had been so busy perfecting everyone else's lives that she had forgotten to live her own. Karen climbed out of her hole and sat on the edge, her feet dangling into the muddy pit. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained, casting her backyard in gray shadows. In 6 hours, she would face a vote of no confidence. In 6 hours, her neighbors would strip her of the only identity she had left. But first, she had a phone call to make. City Utilities Department, this is Jessica. This is Karen Blackwood at 1247 Oak Street. I need to report a potential utility line strike. Are you currently digging, ma'am? I've stopped. Any damage to the line? Karen looked down at the pristine pipe, unmarked despite her enthusiastic excavation. No damage. But I need someone to come out and mark the utilities before I continue. Continue with what? My swimming pool. There was a pause. Ma'am, do you have permits for a swimming pool? That depends. If I'm building a pool, I need permits. If I'm creating a decorative water feature, I don't. The city inspector seems to think it's a pool, but legally speaking, it's whatever I say it is until I actually fill it with water and invite people to swim. Another pause. I'm going to need to transfer you to our legal department. Karen smiled for the first time in weeks. Perfect. By 6:30 p.m., Karen had showered, changed into her best business suit, and armed herself with a folder full of documentation. The community center was packed, with more residents than she had seen at any HOA meeting in years. The Facebook drama had apparently been better than Netflix for generating interest in local politics. Mike Rodriguez called the meeting to order, his voice tight with nervous energy. We're here tonight to address the leadership of this board, and specifically to consider a vote of no confidence in our current president. Karen stood up slowly, her folder clasped in her hands. Before we begin, I have an announcement. Karen, you'll have your chance to speak during the hearing. This isn't about the hearing. This is about the future of this neighborhood. She opened her folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I've just received confirmation from the city that the main sewer line for this subdivision runs directly through my backyard, the same backyard where I've been digging my pool. A murmur went through the crowd. Tom Henderson leaned forward. What does that mean? It means that according to city code, I have an easement claim on that land. It means that the setback requirements don't apply to easement areas. It means that my pool application should have been approved. The room erupted in confused chatter. Mike Rodriguez banged his gavel. That's impossible. We would have known about utility easements. Would you? Karen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression, because I'm looking at the original subdivision plans right here, and they clearly show the sewer easement running through lots 12 through 18. That includes my lot, Tom's lot, and Mike's lot. Mike's face went pale. That can't be right. Oh, it's right. And here's the interesting part. Your deck extends into the easement area by about 6 feet. That's a violation of city code. And Tom, your garden shed is sitting right on top of the main line. That's not just a violation, that's a potential public health hazard. The crowd had gone silent. Karen could feel the shift in the room, the sudden understanding that the tables had turned in a way no one had expected. But don't worry, she continued, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I'm not going to report these violations. I'm going to do something much better. I'm going to resign as HOA president, effective immediately. And then I'm going to build my pool in the easement area, where it's perfectly legal and where none of you can do anything about it. She set the folder on the table and walked toward the door. The vote of no confidence is unnecessary. You can't fire someone who's already quit. Good luck running this place without me. As she reached the door, she paused and turned back. Oh, and Mike, you might want to call a plumber. I think I may have loosened something down there. 3 months later, Karen floated on her back in her new pool, watching the clouds drift across the summer sky. The water was perfectly warm, the tile work was exquisite, and the view of her neighbors' houses was absolutely perfect. She could see right into the Hendersons' kitchen, where Tom was probably still trying to figure out how to move his shed without disrupting the sewer line. The new HOA president, Sarah Chen, who had won by default when nobody else wanted the job, had sent her a letter asking if she would consider serving on that architectural review committee. Karen had sent back a polite decline, along with a photo of herself floating in her pool with a cocktail in her hand. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad says you look happier than you have in years. Pool looks amazing. Can I bring friends when I visit?" Karen smiled and typed back, "Of course, but they'll have to follow the pool rules." Some habits died hard, but sometimes that wasn't such a bad thing. The only mystery now was what she would do with all her newfound free time. She had been thinking about running for city council. After all, someone needed to keep an eye on those utility easements. The shovel hit concrete with a metallic clang that echoed through the pristine Willowbrook subdivision at 6:47 am. Karen Blackwood stood in her backyard, dirt-stained and sweating, her perfectly manicured nails now chipped and bleeding as she gripped the handle with white knuckles. Her neighbor's bedroom windows began lighting up one by one, faces peering through curtains at the woman who had once been their HOA president, now reduced to digging a hole like some kind of deranged gopher. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she screamed at the Henderson house next door, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fury. "You wanted me to follow the rules." 3 weeks earlier, Karen had submitted her pool application to the Willowbrook Homeowners Association with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. The application was immaculate. Architectural drawings, soil reports, contractor estimates, even a detailed landscaping plan that would make the subdivision the envy of the county. She had dotted every I, crossed every T, and paid the $500 application fee without blinking. The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by her own mailman, who couldn't quite meet her eyes. Application denied due to insufficient setback requirements and potential impact on neighborhood aesthetics. It read in cold, bureaucratic language that made her hands shake with rage. Karen had built this HOA from nothing. She had written half the bylaws herself, organized the neighborhood watch, and personally selected the approved paint colors for every house on the block. For 12 years, she had been the iron fist in the velvet glove, the keeper of property values, the guardian of suburban perfection. Now they were using her own rules against her. She called an emergency board meeting for that very evening, pacing her living room like a caged animal as she waited for the other board members to arrive. Tom Henderson shuffled in first, avoiding eye contact. Sarah Chen followed, clutching her purse like a shield. Finally, Mike Rodriguez, the newcomer who had somehow wormed his way onto the board last election. "This is a mistake," Karen announced before anyone could sit down. "My property has adequate setbacks. I measured them myself." "The pool would be visible from the street," Tom mumbled, his voice barely audible. "The guidelines clearly state." "I wrote those guidelines." Karen's voice rose to a pitch that made Sarah flinch. "I know what they say, and I know what they mean. This pool meets every requirement." Mike leaned forward, his engineer's mind already working through the problem. "Karen, your lot is on a corner. The side yard setback applies to both street frontages. Your pool would be 7 feet from the Oak Street property line. The requirement is 15 feet. The room fell silent, except for the tick of Karen's grandmother's clock and the sound of her world cracking apart. She had spent months planning this pool, had already picked out the tile, had fantasized about floating on her back under the summer sun while her neighbors looked on with envy. "Then we changed the rules," she said quietly, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. "We can't just change the rules for you," Sarah whispered. "Watch me." The next morning, Karen stood in her kitchen, staring at the rejection letter while her coffee grew cold. Her reflection in the window showed a woman she barely recognized, hair unwashed, eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night, her usually pristine appearance crumbling like her authority. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Saw the Facebook post. Call me." Facebook post? Karen's heart sank as she opened the app. There it was, posted by Mike Rodriguez at 11:47 p.m. Transparency update. HOA board unanimously denied pool application due to setback violations. All residents must follow the same rules regardless of position. #accountability, #community first. The comments were brutal. Neighbors she had helped, People whose property values she had personally protected were now celebrating her downfall with laughing emojis and snide remarks. "About time someone put her in her place," wrote Janet Morrison, whose fence violation Karen had overlooked just last year. "Rules for thee but not for me," added Dave Park, completely forgetting that Karen had personally intervened when his teenage son's car had been towed for parking violations. Karen's hands trembled as she scrolled through the mockery and betrayal. These people had no idea what she had sacrificed for this neighborhood. The hours she had spent reviewing architectural plans, mediating disputes, organizing community events. She had missed her daughter's recitals, skipped family dinners, and alienated friends, all to maintain the pristine facade of Willowbrook Estates. The doorbell rang, and Karen found herself face to face with Tom Henderson, his expression a mixture of guilt and determination. "Karen, we need to talk," he said, shifting uncomfortably on her doorstep. "Some of the residents are concerned." "Concerned about what?" "About your behavior at the meeting. About the things you said." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They're talking about a vote of no confidence." The words hit her like a physical blow. A vote of no confidence. "Tom, we've been friends for 15 years. I helped you fight City Hall when they wanted to put that cell tower on your street. I know, and I'm grateful. But this isn't about friendship anymore. It's about leadership. You can't threaten to change the rules just because they don't work in your favor." Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Get off my property." "Karen, get off my property." After Tom left, Karen sat in her living room, surrounded by the awards and certificates that had once filled her with pride. HOA President of the Year, Community Service Award, Neighborhood Beautification Recognition. They all felt like relics from someone else's life. Her phone rang, her daughter Emma, calling from college. "Mom, I heard about the pool thing. Are you okay?" Karen almost laughed. Okay. She was the opposite of okay. She was a fallen queen, a Napoleon on her way to Elba. A woman who had built an empire of suburban compliance only to watch it crumble the moment she needed it most. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little disagreement with the board." "Mom, I saw the Facebook posts. Maybe it's time to step back from the HOA stuff. You've been doing it for so long, and it's always stressed you out." Step back, as if she could simply walk away from the thing that had defined her for over a decade. As if she could pretend that her life's work hadn't just been flushed down the drain by ungrateful neighbors and spineless board members. "I have to go, Emma. I'll call you later." That evening, Karen stood in her backyard, looking at the spot where her pool should have been. The grass was green and perfectly manicured, maintained by the same landscaping company that serviced half the neighborhood. It was beautiful and pristine, and absolutely soul-crushing in its emptiness. She went to her garage and pulled out a shovel,